Welcome to the Veriff Voices podcast, a collection of conversations with leaders from across the industry, sharing tips and valuable insight into shaping the future of online identity. This podcast is brought to you by the people of Veriff, rebuilding trust in the digital world. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Veriff Voices, the podcast where we talk about fraud, compliance, technology, and all things related to identity verification and returning trust to the internet. Today, we have a very special episode, actually, and a very special guest joining us. Cecilie Fjellhøy is perhaps best known for an appearance as a victim of fraud, actually, in the 2022 Netflix documentary, The Tinder Swindler, but is now a keynote speaker and activist talking about female empowerment, bouncing back, resilience, and romance fraud as well as many other things. So obviously today's episode is going to be about fraud and specifically the kind of the human costs to it, I suppose. Quite often on this podcast, we talk about the business cost of fraud in sort of dollars and cents, but there's obviously a human story behind every one of those numbers, and that's what we're going to explore today. So Cecilie, welcome first of all, and thank you for joining us. Would you mind just giving us a bit of an intro to yourself? I mentioned a couple of things in there, but obviously there's so much more. So just give us a couple of minutes of just sort of who you are and what you're up to at the moment.
Yeah, thank you as well for having me. I think it's so important that we have victims that we talk to us and that we're not becoming numbers, but we're actually having these stories, because mine is just one of many. When it happened to me, I was like, this is a freaky story. But I come to see that there are, there's tons of us. So yeah, I actually have 10 years experience as a UX designer. That was my bread and butter for a long time. So I actually worked with digital identity and verification in my old job. So I knew the dangers out there already. I worked in banking, and I love that work and kind of how to create experiences that are easy to use for people. And back then, a lot of us were talking about frictionless. How can we make this as easy as possible for the users to do certain amount of things. And I remember back then that was the nick of it all, less clicks. I think it's very fascinating in my background and how everything happened to me, because we look at fraud victims as a certain way, and I think the more stories we have of it happens to everyone, even us who are working in IT. So that was my background. I'm from Norway, and I moved over to the UK to finish my master in arts. So I have a master in digital experience design. So I was working in a consultancy. And yeah, so what I'm doing right now, I'm doing a bit of everything. I'm an advocate, I'm a fraud fighter. It's become my passion. And how lucky I was that when crime first happened to me, it was so extravagant that it could be a Netflix documentary, and people really seem to care and resonate. And being Tinder swindled has become a thing now. Like, that is amazing, and it sets the power of storytelling. So I was thinking, I can't just quit and say I'm good now and look at all these other victims and people who don't have, the strength to stand up. And I was like, if I can do it, my story's already out there. I can tell it. So I decided to co-found a nonprofit called Love Said as well, with Anna Rowe, that is running Catch the Catfish, which is another online website, social media that is helping fraud victims, on one-to-one. She's amazing. Connected with her because I was like, I'm new to the UK. I'm from Norway. What is the processes here? What organizations, banks, everything. I was so new. And we were thinking, we wanted to be a support center. We want to continue. We want to help even more, create peer support networks, because we can see the power of, coming together and having other fraud victims. No one else understands. You can have empathy towards it, but kind of us who lived it, talk to others who's been in the same situation, is amazing. And then, of course, we've been to the parliament here in the UK when they did an inquiry into fraud, which was amazing. Politicians, changing laws, like actually doing something, creating that change, and not like, we know what's coming up, and I know what Veriff is doing, with the verification and how important that will be in the future. I think the work that you're doing, don't think people realize how important that will be.
Let's maybe start with the story, sort of your background, I suppose, when it comes to the Tinder Swindler. A lot of people, unless they've been living under a rock, would have seen this documentary, because it was such a big thing. I remember, such a sort of social phenomenon when it first came out. So if you wouldn't mind, just give us a sort of a brief, for those who haven't seen it, what's a brief recap of that story and some of the things you referenced just a moment ago, actually, around the sort of the process that you went through to sort of come to this in the first place.
No, I have to say there is a lot of people haven't seen it, so it's always a good thing to go through the story again, even though it was very popular at the time. But it was back in 2018. I had just moved to London to finish up my master thesis. I was working part-time at this IT consultancy, and it was a Saturday night, and I was on Tinder. I was swiping back and forth and came over Simon, and he was my type. He was dark, brown eyes. He had a lot of pictures at restaurants, fancy cars, on a private jet. He was 32 years old. I was 29. So for me, it's like the age was like perfect. And of course, we matched. And I was the first one who wrote to him, actually. And I think I always think about that back. Like, you know what it means that when you are the first one writing to someone, you don't really feel he's desperate. So I wrote to him and said, it doesn't seem like you're going to be here for a long time, because you could see that he was jetting around a lot. Oh yeah, and he had his Instagram linked too. He had an Instagram at the time. And so I was checking out and I saw like he had a lot of followers. Tons of people have tagged him in pictures on Instagram. A lot of people are asking, did he seem real? Did he have a trace of him? And a lot of times you try to do your due diligence and you try to see, okay, so other people tagged him. And I was like, okay, seems like otherworldly guy, very different from my life. But if you're a bit bored, why not meet someone who's very different from you? And I always loved dating. I loved love. Unfortunately, I'm a big romantic. So I was like, let's meet this guy. So we meet up very quickly, and because he, of course, was traveling again. So we met up at a very fancy hotel he was staying at in London for a coffee in the morning on Sunday. So that was how quick it was, from Saturday evening to Sunday morning. For me, I have to say that wasn't like a red flag at the time either, because when it comes to online dating, I like to meet people in person. You don't know who you meet, You want to see if they're the ones they say they are. So I meet him, he looks his part, very charismatic, very gentlemanish, guide me into this, where we're having a coffee. And he opens up a lot about his work as a CEO of this big diamond company. And he's gotten the role of his dad, who he said had a nickname, the King of Diamonds. And who am I then, And then he just looked at himself and I'm like, okay. Yeah. And I said, so what's your job? It's wine and dine clients, travel around, signing, the papers. Like, that is, when you're at the top, that's what you do. And he had a daughter as well, opened up about her. And I was like, oh, God. And I even asked him, I said to him, like, you show your wealth. Like, aren't you scared that you will attract the wrong people? And he says, well, this is my life and I don't want to hide it. Like, this is who I am and that's it. So I really, like, the connection was there. Like, the conversation was flowing. He seemed super interested in me and my life. And after the coffee was done, he then said, well, I really want to spend more time with you. This is amazing, but I don't have more time. Like, would you maybe want to join us to Bulgaria for a business trip? And that's when I was like, what? I was sitting there with my laptop because I was supposed to finish my master thesis, just go and sit for the Sunday. And I was like, but I have to write this. No, you can write it on the plane. No worries. And I was like, damn it. And I've had previous experience in my life where I have regret that I didn't do something. And I think back on this till this day where I was like, oh, I should have just said yes. Shouldn't have done, or questioned, like, should have just done it. So I said yes, unfortunately. And then he was guiding me to meet the rest of his team. Because to concoct this type of fraud, to be a CEO, you have to have people around you. You're not the CEO, a billionaire, if you don't have a team. So he was showing me his personal assistant, business partners. He had a bodyguard, Peter. Three drivers maybe was waiting for us, and then it was his daughter and the baby's mother there. So there was like this chaos. Everyone was waiting for Simon. So you could feel that he was the boss. And then we went on this flight. Everything was great. And I was like thinking, like, I asked the baby's mother, about Simon. And I said, my God, this is crazy. She was from Finland. I'm from Norway. So we're both Nordics. And we're kind of like, what is this, And she's like, yeah, it's crazy, but Simon's a great dad. I just don't want my daughter, I don't want this to influence her. I'm keeping her up in Finland. But didn't say anything else to me when I was asking about him. So when I came back home, I was like, oh my God, that was a crazy experience. I bet I'm never going to hear from him again. But he kept contact. We always had time. And he even pulled away once. And I sent a message to him wanting, oh, is everything okay? You're really insecure, if you're losing interest. So he was very good at the start to not seem overly eager either, just the right amount. But of course, he love bombed me with 100 red roses for my birthday, came to visit me in Oslo on a private jet just to see me, all these grand gestures to show that he's a man of his words, tons of voice notes, telling how special our connection is. And I just really felt as a 29-year-old, I've met, oh my God, how lucky am I? I just moved to London, meeting this fabulous guy who really likes me. And you feel really special when he likes you because everyone wants to be around him. So it's just it's something about him. And he's really caring and funny. In person, he's actually a very enjoyable guy to be around. And I met his friends in Amsterdam. But I told you about the bodyguard Peter. It was a reason he had Peter. So what was looming in the background was that he had been doing very well in his business, and they had been making threats against his life. So was breaking in his flat. I saw CCTV footage on an app. I have no idea to this day what that was, for example, that he was showing me, because it was an actual app that he went into, where you could see a door. I'm sure it was somewhere else, but you know what I mean. It's just these type of things that's very good from a technical perspective. And then he told me about funeral flowers, bullets in the mail. He told me that someone just had called their hotel in Stockholm saying, "Hi, Simon," and he was always traveling under another name because that was security. Well, we become boyfriend and girlfriend, and I and then I give him a very nice Valentine's present. And I think them as a team, when they got that, they knew that they kind of had me, that I was enough emotionally involved. And that's when he said that his security team has said that he no longer could use his card for a very short period of time, but it put him into two very much troubles because they could see where he was by using the name Simon Levive. And at this time, he had helped me in so many ways from an emotional standpoint, as just a person. It takes a bit time before you become boyfriend, girlfriend. And he asked me pretty quick. I'm not the one who can hide behind that this took months, to say the least. But at the time, he had been telling me about people who have turned his back to him, how he was the big bad wolf of the family because he had a daughter that wasn't Jewish. And it was just several things where I felt, oh, this is a small thing. This is not about money. It's about his security and just helping him out for a couple of weeks. I felt he was a CEO and he had so many people around him that who am I to question this ask? Of course I should have, but at that time I just didn't. So he asked if I had an American Express card, which was his favorite bank. Don't like to say that, but it is the truth. And I didn't have an American Express card. I didn't even have in Norway, a credit card isn't that I didn't know so much about points, building. I was I just had a credit card for emergencies. I never used a credit card, smart, And he said, well, we connect the cards and you get the points. And I was like, okay, well, you have the money. It's not about the money, So I'm fine as long as you're safe. Get the card, give the card to him, and he starts racking it up immediately. Because in Simon's Levi lives, 10K is nothing. And then in your life, 10K becomes nothing. It's horrendous because it's not enough. So I think, and because this was a new credit card in Amex, they called me every single day because it was blocked. And I had to lie to say that I was in Cape Town, that I was in Bangkok. Because remember, I had my full-time job as a UX designer in this IT company. So I had meetings, I had workshops, and I had him calling me and sending me messages 24/7 saying that the card is blocked. And when card is blocked meant that he was kind of in danger. He didn't even need to say it, but it's implicit that he might be in danger. This is why this is a scary crime, because what you think is love, it's hidden. The crime is super hidden.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of those things too that you mentioned a couple of sort of keywords I've been writing down as you were talking there about sort of the emotional aspect of this. Certainly, first of all, about the sort of the regret about missing out on things in previous relationships. So you thought, oh, give it a try. So there's so much of that is being sort of that kind of deliberate manipulation, I think, is probably the most insidious part of all of this, actually, which we'll get to in a moment. But I think we can just talk about how quickly that situation ramped up, because you mentioned there was the first ask for money, as it were, and then sort of unblocking the card. And I think some of the numbers here eventually get a bit eye-watering. So I just want to give a bit of sort of just a context of setting of how this situation escalated and how quickly and to what extent.
Super quick. In 3 weeks' time, he had been able to use $85,000 on that Amex card without any down payments at all. They haven't received a dime. And after 3 weeks, that's when they called me and said, we know you're not using your card. And of course, as a fraud victim, and this is why it's so important, about business, is how you talk to fraud victims. Because how they talked to me was very accusative and that I had done something wrong. And of course, from that aspect, I shouldn't have given my card, but you don't know why. And I think, but being that accusative, I ran straight to my fraudster because I was scared. And at the point in time, he was my boyfriend. Like, I didn't suspect fraud at that point. They didn't say, we think you're being defrauded, but like, we know you're not using your card. And now we're blocking it. I even sent a complaint email to them because I was so upset. So that says a lot about my brainwashing here too. Unfortunately, then, the security situation was not getting better. It was getting worse. It was making immersive theater around me, that the enemies had found me and he left me alone in Amsterdam because, it was asking me to make my Instagram private. Like, I was feeling an insane amount of pressure. So I gave him my MasterCard, my DNB MasterCard, my Norwegian MasterCard. And unfortunately, in Norway, I had great credit. In the UK, not so. That's why Amex had to call, like, they didn't have the necessary documents. Yeah, and that's another thing. Like, what I did with Amex was really sad was that he hired me at his firm. It was never any firm. So those documents I sent in was fake. So that's another level to this crime where they don't do anything of the illegal activities. We're doing it for them. So by me sending in those documents, I'm the one who's committing fraud. And that is very, it's super sad. And so just by that, that's how it was up to 85. In Norway, I had a great paying job. I had my flat. Says a lot that I was given very high consumer debt loans over a very short amount of time. I even sent a message to Simon saying no wonder people goes bankrupt here because, it's so easy to get loans without security. I was shocked because I've never done it. And I was like, what? And from a fraudster's point of view, I always laughed. He was like, ha, what? Continue, I've always been thinking that. Like, he must have been so happy about me just openly saying it. That's what I'm always trying to say to people. It's not a calculated risk we're taking. It's not that we're thinking, this might be a fraud. Let me continue doing this. And that is why it's so sad. So I ramped up a lot of high interest loans in Norway. So in just 54 days, he had taken over $250,000 from me. So over 200,000 pounds. Like, it's an insane amount of money for someone that just has a very normal paying job. It's an impossible amount of money to pay down because this wasn't even private loans or just money I had.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it too, right? That there's this sort of calculated piece where they've done this before. They know what they're doing, and they kind of position you as the risk taker, and in that piece as well. And I think that gives some idea, I think, of the sort of the financial implication. But you mentioned a couple of sort of key words along the way there about sort of the emotional impact of this. So what's the sort of the feeling that you were experiencing at the time? It sounds to me as though you were kind of well, look, just to be fully transparent, I rewatched the documentary when I knew that we would be talking, and one of the things I remember just keep sort of throwing my hands to my head, and maybe it's the job that I do, but it's throwing hands to my head, going, no, don't do it, don't give any more money, because I think when you're watching from the outside, it's a very rational decision, right? But when you're on the inside of it, it's a very emotional process. And I think let's talk about that emotional process, because what is it what are some of the feelings that you go through? And you've mentioned some of them already with feeling like you were sort of obligated to do this, and you were helping somebody out that you were clearly sort of in love with at the time. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I think that's a really interesting part of this. It is probably overlooked in a number of discussions about fraud.
I think it just it started so simple. It started so small. But when you mix love and fear with each other, which he was really good at, and I think he could see quite early from others he had defrauded, I wasn't the only one, how effective to make people feel scared for you, what they will do. And especially if you think that you're rich, because not about, hi, babe, I'm poor. Can you help me out with 10K? That's not, of course, most people would be, are you sure I'm getting it back? That was not. So I think just a concoction of that. But I think the immense amount of pressure it was every single day when you're working full time, you're trying to keep it up. That's a pressure where they're not making you think clearly. It's no way of you to get out of it. And I was vulnerable in the sense that I was quite new to the city. I didn't have my family there. I didn't have close friends. So I was all alone with this. I didn't meet people in a sense where they could see how I was doing over an extended period of time. And I always had in the back of my mind that things were going to work out. Things were going to work out. I tried to make an analogy like it feels like you're on a spinning wheel, you know, like you're on an amusement and it goes faster and faster and faster and faster. And you have to make a decision if you're going to just stay on because it will work itself out in the end, you know? Try to jump out. What is the safest? What would cause you the least amount of harm? So I kept, you know, just staying on it much longer than you're supposed to do because you're just hoping that it will just, you know, everything will work itself out. Because I don't even understand. I'm looking back, Chris, and I'm looking at those messages and I'm so broken down. I'm asking him for forgiveness. That I trust people too much. And he used the word we a lot. We are in a war. We need to be strong. No one now. You know, we are going to get through this. It wasn't him, you know, taking up these loans. It was me. And what I think is scary with this is that you are alone. There's not a we here, you know, when you're with the fraudster, you know, that is what he knows. But I think I was so heightened throughout that entire relationship, and all my worth was dependent on the money. And at the end, I wrote to him, you need more help and love in your life than just my money. Because I knew kind of that was at the end. I was like, and that's when the lies started to crumble. And I think that will be my advice to a lot of people is don't stop asking those questions because fraudster won't be able to, you know, in the end, it won't make sense what they're asking of you.
The obvious guilty party here is the person committing the fraud. That goes without saying. But do you think there's something? There's a system in which they operate, right? And do you think that sort of businesses, for example, have more of a responsibility here to help people, or to be, to make it more difficult for these things to take place?
Yes, from my perspective, yes. I think Simon knew so well how to use the system. He says no one cares as long as they get their money. And he said that to a victim, and we were like, okay. And it's true. You know, he could use my credit card. It's a very easy thing. He could use my credit card all over the world. This was not just me sending over big amounts and then I didn't know what happened to them. I could see where he was using Cecilie Fjellhøy. And just on online stores, Cecilie Fjellhøy, a Norwegian DNB card, is buying plane tickets for Israeli names and Israeli passports. And I understand that's just how it works today. But those extra measures could have saved me a lot of time because the more friction it would have been for Simon from businesses. For example, he was stopped once in Norway. It was amazing. Like, I loved it now. Did not love it at the time because we hated Norway. But the hotel was like, because it was Norwegian, you know, but you say, Cecilia, where's Cecilia? I don't know who was there. Nothing was done about that, but I was not there. And they said, this is weird. Where is she? Where are you having her card? And they refused them. And they contacted all the other hotels in the Oslo region, so they couldn't do any business because they saw that it's not normal for a business to only have one credit card available. Whoopsie. And these are the type of things very easily at the bottom line. And I know that at the end of the entire system here, but that was so how easy it was for him. And of course, businesses, when it came to me, when I sent in, for example, those fake documents, they said that I suddenly lived in New York. Why didn't they give me a call asking me, well, when you applied for this Amex card, you lived in London and you had a job in London. Why suddenly are you living in New York and have a job in New York? This is very plausible. Could have been very easily stopped there. When I took up all the loans, sometimes I didn't even need documentation for it. And it's very weird when I then applied for them in Norway, I sent in my payslips from the UK. Real ones, by the way. Not but I sent in my payslips from the UK. Why didn't they ask me, well, if you're taking up a loan in Norway, you're supposed to live here. Why are you having a job in the UK? Like, there were just so many things where I see as a business, you can stop it quite early. It doesn't even need to happen. And I think that was... And I have to say, when it comes to a digital identity that I had, I met myself so many times in a situation where my digital identity was amazing. When he was using that on paper, everything was wonderful when they logged in. And so, my God, credit score to the top. She's earning this much money. She's owning an apartment. In reality, I was not good. I was not good. A phone call could have helped. And in many ways, when it comes to identity theft, in Norway, they don't even call. So it has been exploding. At least I did it. I understand when it comes to authorized push payments, it's a very different scenarios. But we have a lot of identity thefts too. Verification like this, they don't even do that. And it's this very easy stuff. I know we're talking about how new tech can help, but I was like, we're not even doing the bare minimum at times. And I think that's what makes me sad, when I know how it really is out there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we've just released some research of our own actually, which looks at the I looked every year we do it. It's our annual fraud report where we look at the our customer data and how they're interacting with their customers. So we see the types of fraud that we're effectively stopping on their behalf. A lot of it we're seeing a real increase actually in what we call kind of assailant in the middle fraud, which is exactly your experience, where quite often the account holder is genuine, but they are being manipulated either physically or digitally at their end. And that's sort of a growing fraud sort of trend, if you like. But it's still a tiny percentage of the puzzle. The most of the fraud we see is the traditional types of fraud, if you like, around forged documents and things like that, which should have been eliminated by now. So it's really interesting to hear your take on it. And actually, I didn't realize that you came from a UX background. That's really interesting. So I think let's when we're talking about what businesses can do, is it just a matter of just inserting more friction into the process, do you think, and sort of making it just that bit more complicated? It feels to me as though I think of myself as a consumer. If I'm opening a bank account, I kind of want it to have some friction because it shows to me that there's some checks and there's some rigor that's going on behind the scenes. Is that something that you agree with and you would kind of recommend for other businesses who are sort of in this field?
Yeah, and that is what I mean. I think, especially when it comes to transferring money, I understand if you open an account, but something that we do day to day, we're being so accustomed to not being asked questions. And I think the businesses need to try to highlight that fraud prevention is customer service. We need to really rethink it. That is not to make lives more difficult for you, but we want to make sure that you are really sure that you want to make this transfer. So I see that the banks have gotten a lot of, better, especially here in the UK. They have that they check on the other side that everything matches. Don't have that in Norway. Never even thought about it, that maybe that could be a good idea. So there are several things there that has come into play, but there are still to this day, if you want to make a transfer, and I've had that from several fraud victims and banking employees coming to me later on, where my biggest question is, no banks have one set process. They all have their own, business mind. I have to say fraud is not a business. It's not. I when I hear that, like business secrets, I get mad. So if you say that you have a very good fraud prevention tactic, you want to keep that hidden from your competitors. So you want more crime to happen. So you say, "Oh, that makes me angry because that is not how we should view this." So my thinking is that if you know a crime is happening, you know that poor old Gerda doesn't have a fiance. You might not be 100%, but you're 99.9. In all other crime types, we have an obligation to contact the police. Or at least, and if you can't, stop the transfer. Why aren't we doing that? And I've been talking to a lot of in the banking and everything, and I understand it's not as easy. But for me, lobbyism, I'm lobbying from a victim's perspective. You would rather have us very angry with you on the phone, and I would have, if the bank would have stopped, would have blocked my account, I would have been, how dare you? But a week later, we would come and kiss your feet because we need time. We need time and we need questions. It's about how you meet people. If you take up the phone and you say to someone, we know you're being defrauded, the stigma and shame around that means I'm stupid? So we will go in defense immediately. It's more, how are you? Why are you sending? I'm thinking about creating maybe the 5 whys. We have the 5 whys, I don't know, in the UX design, if an idea is good or not. You pitch an idea and you ask 5 whys to the person with the idea. If you can't go as deep as 5 whys to why the idea is good, it's a bad idea. And I was thinking the same with fraud victims, is that you don't need much. Just ask, so why are you sending us my blood? Why? In the end, you won't be able to explain it. So I think those are more the open-ended, sowing that little seed instead of saying, you're being defrauded, or the accusative tone that I can understand they're getting to, because they get tired, of people, becoming victims of this. And I totally get it. But I think we need to humanize this again. It's become too easy, and it's become. I've heard when I've asked of this in Norway, where they said, "Well, things are going to take longer." But come on, can we just slow down then? Like that is kind of, and I don't know, for people who needs to do an instant payment, let us find other ways that they can do that. But that is kind of what I don't know your thoughts on that.
No, I 100% agree with you. And actually, we did some research earlier in the year, which was sort of consumer research, actually. And we did ask the question to people, would you be prepared to sort of put up with a slightly longer onboarding experience, for example, if it meant you were going to be safer from fraud? And the answer was almost 80% saying yes, that they would do that. So I think that there's a misconception with businesses, financial services companies particularly, that they just want to make everything smoother, quicker, and faster, and everything else. But actually, that's not necessarily what people want. It feels to me that they would rather be safe and know that their data is secure and know that their money is secure. And
But and I have to say, family and friends too. We're not alone in society. It's even though you might be able to work it out, understand it, but you might have an old aunt or uncle or grandmother or mother or dad's like mine, and they will, and it will be much more sophisticated. And I think that we need to look at it more than, well, I wouldn't. And I think it's very difficult to even have awareness campaigns when people don't think it will happen to them. An awareness campaign won't even go in because they're thinking, well, it won't be me. So I'm hoping to more like, well, we should just care about other people in society too, because it's horrendous out there. Even if you are thinking it will never, but I have to say it will happen. It's a fraud for everyone, but there's much more than romance fraud out there. I think romance fraud though is one of the worst when it comes to the repercussions and what you're left with afterwards and the shame attached to it. But all fraud is about trust, and I try to tell people, that is, if you trust a link, that is the trust you put in. Like what I meant is that it's just trust being exploited in society. It's the same thing. But of course, when you have an added layer of love, that's horror. Like that's what I mean. That is horrible.
let's talk about that for a moment, because I think that's really interesting too. Is that obviously this has, the documentary, for example, has an end, right? It's not that's the money that was spent, but you have to live your life after this, and it goes on and on. So what's been the kind of the longer term sort of psychological impact of that? Have you changed the way you behave, for example, and has it changed you as a person, do you think?
It changed me tremendously. I think I don't like to say it like that, but I think I've become a better person. I think fraud victims are the best people to see fraud. You know how it is with us, that it needs to happen to us. It's almost like you burn your hand on the stove, you know it, but you need to burn your hand before you realize, how painful that is, unfortunately. I'd become much more calm. I don't put, my future was really taken away from me in the sense of what I was expecting. I was turning 30 when I was with him. I had my flat. I had to sell my flat. I had to file for bankruptcy in the UK. I was in 2 trials in Norway because 4 banks took me to court because I couldn't pay my debts. Lost both of them. That was highly traumatizing of a financial institution to do to a victim. Something that I will never forgive them for, because I'm not the only one they did it to. It was a systemic thing that they did. And I was a suspect with the police in the UK too. So it was when all of it, like the dust had settled with Simon, and I blocked him and cried my tears over that, which is weird in itself. You're being defrauded, but you're still sad over a relationship. And it's very difficult for romance fraud victims because you mourn a relationship that never existed. It's much more than just a boyfriend who maybe took your money and he's a douchebag, or a girlfriend who did it, and just left. But at least the person was real, at one point in time. But this person concocted everything to take your money. So you are really questioning everything about your judgments, about who you are as a person, if you're even lovable. You go back in time, you become an investigator yourself because you're really like, what did happen? So I think knowledge is power. I've always loved studying. So what I did a lot of research into, what is the fraudster? What methods are they using? How did I become a victim? What kind of, the social engineering that he did around me to get me to do what I was doing. And that's when I came over course of control. adult grooming. I came over the research down in Australia with Dr. Cassandra Cross, where it shows the similarities between domestic abuse and romance fraud. And I was like, oh my God, there was so much there. Contingent expressions of love, that if I didn't do this, he wouldn't love me. And I was like, oh my God, I got a lot of answers. And I think that really helped me to kind of move on from the fraud in itself and to help others. But for me, still to this day, if I go into those good, warm times with Simon, I still get teary-eyed. It's so weird. If I go with how he made me feel, how happy I was, because it's difficult because you felt, and then you're wondering, did he feel it? And you felt that he was cheating on you. Because when I found out, he had 3, 4 other women. Like, he had gotten, I think it was 2 or 3 girls from Norway down to Amsterdam to party up, and he was supposed to meet my family in Norway, and I had paid for that. He spent £6,800 at a hotel in Amsterdam that weekend with these girls.
Mm.
From a relationship standpoint, I was heartbroken, but you don't have time for that because I had 9 creditors on my back wanting my money, And
Yeah.
I think that inhumanity I was shown back then, that has made me really want it. I just was like, I can't let this happen to anyone else. This is so wrong. I was shocked. I came from a very perspective from Norway. As a country, we help each other, always feel, no matter what, if it's health complications, no matter if you smoked for 60, 70 years, they will help you, if you know what, like. And then with money, if you have, yeah, of course, I got myself into it myself, but I was like, well, I have to get some help. No. So I was like, I was naive in the expression that I really thought that, well, this is just money, it needs to work itself out. But of course it hasn't.
Absolutely. And look, I think that let's turn what was clearly a negative experience into something positive. Because I think your work since has been remarkable. You're a big advocate for this. You speak on it all the time. So what's some of your advice to people who are kind of might find themselves into this situation, actually? Because as you mentioned, it's a really, the people perpetuating this type of fraud are professionals. They really know how to sort of pull at the emotional strings on people. So what would you advise to folks? What is it that they can sort of watch out for to make sure that they're not caught up in something like this?
I know I think that with romance fraud, it's so difficult because it's almost like if I say some advices and they feel, you know what I mean? I think advices for phishing and stuff like that is much easier. But of course, when it comes to romance fraud, love bombing, like it's the one thing. If they pour their heart in, if you're their dream woman or man, because I want to say this is not a gender crime. I get really annoyed. I want more men to speak up because this is not, especially online ones. I think there are more men than women, actually. I think it's big to bit. The love bombing, that you're the perfect man or woman for them. They mirror you, they will become the perfect person for you. They will shower you with gifts, compliments, everything. Of course, they will even ask about your job, they want to ask about, they want to find out how much money you have, what kind of positions you're in. A lot of, if it's online, they won't be able to meet up. And that is just not true. But I think with what's going to happen in the future, I don't want to say they're not going to video call, because suddenly now they can video call as well. So I think that is what's going to make this very difficult and sad at the start, when we start this. I think this is the start of a new awareness we need to have publicly and online, that we need to rethink what is real and what isn't. Who are we meeting here? So the advice to people that we have to be more vigilant. We need to question everything, unfortunately, but not that we are going to go around and just be looking at each other, but just have that in the back of our minds. Of course, if they ask for money, don't, like, love is not about money. If anyone asks you for any type of help with money, it's a fraud, and you need to run as fast as you can. So these are like very simple things that if I would have known back in 2018, 6 years ago now, I think I would have been better, prepared for it. And I have to ask, and I have to say, talk to friends and family around you about the people you meet. Be very clear about it. And I really hope that, yeah, and I really hope that maybe businesses can, it would be nice. I don't know if it exists, but I think if when our family becomes elderly, that we can actually help them out, protecting them by maybe putting in some mechanisms when it comes to their online banking, because a lot of them, I've been shocked how easy it's been for them to suddenly just invest in crypto or send over 100K, an old woman, 80 years old. The bank is like, well, she wants to do it. I was like, who? So I hope in the future as well that we can be more of a protective society, you know. Yes, I know she can do it, it's her money, but yeah, I that is what I hope for everyone around, that care a bit more when people want to do things that is really unusual and will destroy their lives. 'Cause I have to say as well, romance fraud and investment fraud is ruining people's life. This is not a £10 bought on Facebook Marketplace. Oh shit, you know? And I think that's why a lot of, when it comes to fraud and scams, we have such a big leap from that, you know, where's I darn it, or I got something I didn't order, to life-changing horrible people are killing themselves, you know. And I hate, this is trigger warning almost, sorry, but this is as serious. And I think that's getting muddled in. Let's just mutton, you know, get over it. And it's difficult.
Yeah, it is. It very much so. And I think your advice is right there. Really, it's just to sort of, just to hold a mirror up to something sometimes and just ask the questions of is this as it's supposed to be? And sometimes, friends and family and that kind of thing are great for that. But I think there's a really interesting point in there that you sort of touched on a little bit, actually, which was, we obviously look at the financial impact of things. And what we've talked about here is being able to verify identity a little bit with banks and making transfers and payments and things like that. But what we're finding here at Veriff is that the number of companies discovering a use case for this is growing kind of exponentially, really. And one of them that comes up quite a lot is dating platforms, because you mentioned it there. Like, if you can have an element of trust that the person you're talking to or messaging with is actually a legitimate person and they have gone through a registration process and everything else, it just adds a layer, which is all of a sudden you can feel a bit more reassured that the person you're talking to is a real genuine person, is that has the intentions that they're going coming into this with the same thing as you are. So it does kind of, I think it does. It's a roundabout way of asking this question, but it does almost trap back to the very beginning of this process, when obviously you were on a dating app and talking to somebody there. If that had been in place then, it may have prevented all of these problems. Do you think that there's a bigger question here around sort of trust on the internet, which isn't just limited to financial services, I suppose, is my question?
God, yes, everything. As I said, just meetings, you know. As I said, I haven't met you in real life, you know. It's the truth. And when I think about that now, yeah, we never identify us before we go into an online meeting, which is interesting. So you can, as long as someone has a link, just put in Cecilie Fjellhøy. Oh, that's me, you know. That, but yeah, of course, dating apps. I have been, and Meta, and just social media in general. It's been horrendous. I've been speaking to police and banks, and everyone's saying how big of an issue this is and how they're doing, of course, a lot, but not enough. You know, it's an explosion. So it's so nice because they know they can do more, and it's been amazing collaborating with them. When you then go to the dating apps and tech companies, which have been very quiet in this, they're saying we do everything in our power. We're removing 80 to 90% of it. And who on the ground. We're on the ground. We're looking. Who could see the amount of fake profiles, and very clearly fake profiles. And this is what I think is really sad. What when the deepfakes become even better? What do we do then? Now we can see very clearly if someone has an AI generated face, but so it's still very normal that they're using stolen pictures that they've taken. And it's still, to this day, if you go into Facebook and you search up Samuel Levi, there's 10, 11 profiles of him there. Why? Like, they know very well that Samuel Levi doesn't have 10, 11 profiles, so they can't even do that. And that is why I'm questioning them. I think it was the first time, I think it's a week ago now, yeah, where they finally admitted that they've had training groups on Facebook, openly training groups for scammers that they've had. And it's been horrendous. And this was the first time last week where they admitted to that. So at least the door is opening up here. But yeah, verifying who we are, these scammer groups, would have even existed if people would have to have a verified profile, you know, to be able to post and say that they're doing illegal activities? No. It would be so easy for the police, you know. Now these are using fake profiles. Especially with dating too. People are tired. People are so tired of talking to fakes. The amount of people, they just need to change. And we need the dating apps, and we need the dating apps and the tech companies with us. I feel like they're not there yet, but I love the pressure that has been a lot here in the UK with the banks. Lloyds have spoken out. UK Finance has spoken up about Meta to say we are reimbursing these fraud victims. But it's not us. You're the funnel, this big funnel, and the banks are trying their best, and they're doing nothing because they're not losing any money. The revenue. Oh my God, I met someone from a dating app who said that they earn nothing by having fraudsters on their platforms. So you're saying that you're not getting ad revenue from the amount of active users on your dating apps. If you know what I mean, it's difficult for me to sit there and take it seriously when I don't believe what they're saying. Be honest. Honest is so much better than, that you're trying to avert responsibility. And especially, yeah, the dating apps has, oh no, sorry, I get very heated because the online ones is a huge industry. The online is high crime. It goes to drug trafficking, human trafficking. So when people are saying fraud victims, don't care about them, the money is going to fund terrorism, to fund all of these illegal activities. They're not going to good guys, not going to charity. So we should all care in the end. It shouldn't be that, like when I hear now that the banks are going to reimburse victims, of course I'm happy about it, but I don't want it to happen in the first place. I'm not the one, like, of course I don't want a victim to be held forever, have to file for bankruptcy as I did, that these are life-changing consequences. But I don't want it to happen. I want them to stop it beforehand, but that's where we need verified identities online, and I think that's the only way to go.
Financial services companies, as an example, are kind of mandated by law. They have to go through certain KYC checks and things like that. That's obviously not the case for a dating platform or a social media platform. Do you think that's going to be what it takes, or do you think we as a society have it in us to do this without kind of legislation?
Unfortunately, how I see it, if a company isn't losing money on something, they won't care enough. They will care, but they won't care enough, unfortunately. I don't like the whip. I would rather give a carrot, but we've been trying to do that. I see the difference with the banks in the UK and in Norway. Huge difference in the fraud awareness, the money they put into it, the care that they have. Unfortunately, I feel it has to be something like the Online Safety Act in the UK is the first step. But I think as well, having big companies calling them out will help. And awareness campaigns as well to show, the devastation here. And that is something that all of us should care about. So it's not about you as an individual, but I think we need to, level it up to tell them. And as I said, fraud prevention as customer service, I think that's how we need to look at it. But I think there's smaller bits all over. But I think, unfortunately, I think they need to get fined before and lose money before they will do the big steps here.
Yeah, I'm sadly I agree with you on that. I think it's one of those things too that it, I mean, just seeing this from the service that we offer at Veriff, for example, it's actually all of this stuff is very preventable. Like there is a way to verify identities, right? There is a way to make sure that the person is making the payment who says they are, and that they're doing so with legitimate reasons and everything else. But of course, it's a paid for service, but relative to how much people are losing to fraud, relative to how much companies are being fined for not having the right fraud prevention in place, it feels to me like a no-brainer, but maybe that's just because I'm on this side of the fence and not the other. I don't know.
But I really feel it will come together. I see a slight change. Meta is having conferences. They're doing more stuff. I think they're getting. I see, UK finance calling them out. I hope more in the US too, because that's where a large base of this is, and that's where they as company are based. So I was like, we need the US with us a bit here. But we will see. I always try to have a positive mindset, and we need to have that because for me this is not an option. We are online, and we just need it to be safe.
Absolutely. No, I fully agree with that. That feels like a good place to wrap things up, actually. Or what would be the sort of the final takeaway from our conversation here, do you think?
I think, if you are a fraud victim, if you're a family or friend of someone, go into lovesaid.org, go to victim support in the UK. There are help out there for you. And please reach out. I think you're not alone in this. And I think that is the best thing.
That's good. That's come up so much, actually. You've said this about our society and people around you and your own sort of little community of help. And I think I really like that idea, actually, that there is help out there. And I think some of this stuff is very isolating and it is easy to feel alone with it. But as you've said countless times, it feels like that's not the case, actually. And there is support out there. You just got to find it. But thank you so much for joining us. That was really good.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And thanks everybody for listening. We'll catch you next time. This podcast is brought to you by Veriff. Identity verification made simple. Learn more at veriff.com.